AITA for refusing to let my husband's parents move in with us after they lost their house. Even though we have a spare room, I, 34F, have been married to my husband, Mark, 36M, for 8 years. We have one daughter, Lily, who's 6. We live in a comfortable 3-bedroom home that we bought 5 years ago after a lot of saving and sacrifice. I work as a nurse, and Mark is a high school teacher. We're not rich, but we're comfortable and responsible with our finances. Mark's parents, Linda and George, have always had questionable money habits. They've both worked decent jobs for most of their lives, but they tend to spend impulsively. New cars every few years, vacations they couldn't really afford, random gadgets and furniture they'd replace constantly. They've also helped Mark's younger brother, Jason, 28M, financially for years because he can't catch a break, even though he's never held down a job for more than a few months. About 3 months ago, Linda and George called us in a panic. They were being evicted. Apparently, they had taken out a home equity loan a few years back to pay off Jason's credit card debt and then refinanced again to consolidate their own debt, but they'd fallen behind on payments. The bank had foreclosed on their house. They said they needed a place to stay just for a few months while they figured things out. Mark immediately offered for them to move in with us. He didn't even discuss it with me first. Our house technically has a spare bedroom, Lily's playroom. It's full of her toys, art supplies, and the reading nook we built together during the pandemic. It's her favorite place. I wasn't thrilled about the idea of converting it into a guest room, especially since I knew a few months with his parents could easily turn into forever. When I told Mark I wasn't comfortable with them moving in, he got defensive. He said, "They're my parents. What am I supposed to do? Let them live in their car." I suggested we help them find a short-term rental or pay for a motel for a few weeks while they figured things out. He said that was cold and accused me of not caring about his family. Still, I held my ground. I reminded him that his parents have made a series of poor financial decisions and that we couldn't just take responsibility for them. If they moved in, it would affect our privacy, our routines, and our daughter. Plus, they're both smokers and heavy drinkers, and I didn't want that around Lily. Mark was furious, but eventually he agreed to talk to his brother about helping. Of course, Jason claimed he couldn't take them because he rents a 1-bedroom apartment, which we later learned he shares with his girlfriend and her 2 cats. So Mark ended up helping his parents pay for a small extended stay motel. That was 3 months ago. Since then, they've been calling constantly, asking when they can move in. Every time they talk to Mark, the few months turns into just until we get back on our feet, then just until we can find a cheaper place, then just for the winter. Last week, Linda called me directly while Mark was at work. She said she and George were having a hard time affording the motel and asked if they could please come stay just for a while. I told her that it wasn't a good idea and that we didn't have space. She started crying, saying I was tearing the family apart and that Mark would be ashamed of me if he knew how heartless I was being. When Mark got home, she had already called him. He was livid. He said I humiliated his mother and that I made him look like he doesn't take care of his family. We had our worst fight in years. I told him that I sympathized, but his parents' situation wasn't our fault. We have a child to think about, and bringing 2 adults with financial and substance issues into our home isn't safe or sustainable. I asked if he was willing to set boundaries or if he planned to let them live with us indefinitely. He didn't answer. The next morning, I woke up to find that Mark had moved all of Lily's toys and furniture out of the playroom and stacked it in the hallway. He said he might as well start making room because his parents need a place to sleep. I lost it. I told him he was crossing a line by making that decision without me. He said he was tired of me controlling everything. That was a week ago. We've barely spoken since. He's been spending a lot of time at his parents' motel, and I'm starting to wonder if he's planning to bring them over while I'm at work. I've considered putting my foot down completely and telling him that if his parents move in, Lily and I will go stay with my sister for a while. Now, I'm questioning whether I'm being unreasonable. I know they're his parents, and I understand he feels responsible for them. But they've made mistake after mistake and expect everyone else to clean up the mess. I've worked hard to build a stable, peaceful home for our daughter, and I don't want to jeopardize that. Mark keeps saying family doesn't abandon family. But I feel like his parents have taken advantage of him, and by extension me, for years. They've borrowed money from us before and never paid it back. They show up unannounced, drink too much, criticize how we raise Lily, and then act like they're doing us a favor by being around. I'm torn. I love my husband and don't want this to destroy our marriage, but I also refuse to sacrifice our daughter's well-being to enable his parents' irresponsibility. So, AITA for refusing to let my husband's parents move in with us, even though we technically have the space. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. It helps the content grow and motivates me to create even more great videos. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any new uploads. By the way, I'm curious, when do you usually watch my videos? While working, studying, or just relaxing at home? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you for your support. AITA for refusing to let my sister's fiancé propose at my wedding, even though it caused a huge family rift. So I, 28F, got married 3 months ago to my husband, Jake, 30M. It was a small but elegant wedding. Around 80 people, held a local vineyard that I'd dreamed of since I was a teenager. Everything was going perfectly. The weather, the music, the food, the decor. It was genuinely one of the happiest days of my life. My sister, Claire, 26F, was my maid of honor. She and I have always been close, though she has a bit of a habit of making things about her. She's not malicious, but she's one of those people who can't stand not being the center of attention for too long. She's loud, charismatic, and very used to being the fun one in the family, while I've always been seen as the quieter, more responsible older sister. A few weeks before the wedding, Claire's boyfriend of 3 years, Ryan, 27M, pulled me aside at a family barbecue and said he wanted to ask me something really special. He told me he was planning to propose to Claire, and he thought my wedding would be the perfect place to do it. He said he wanted to pop the question during the reception, since everyone would already be dressed up and celebrating. I was immediately uncomfortable. I told him, as gently as possible, that I didn't think it was a good idea. I explained that I didn't want anything to overshadow my wedding day, and that I really wanted the focus to be on the marriage Jake and I were celebrating. Ryan looked a little surprised, but said he understood. Or at least I thought he did. Fast forward to the wedding weekend. The night before the ceremony, during the rehearsal dinner, I overheard Ryan talking to one of Jake's groomsmen about the big moment tomorrow. My stomach dropped. I pulled him aside again and reminded him, firmly, that I had said no to a proposal happening at my wedding. He laughed it off and said, "Don't worry, it'll just be a quick thing. Claire will love it. You'll be part of such a great memory for us." At that point, I didn't even know what to say. I told him point blank that if he tried to propose during my wedding, I would have him escorted out. He looked genuinely shocked, called me up tight, and said I was being selfish. I told Jake about it later that night, and he agreed with me completely, saying it was our day and we had every right to set boundaries. The ceremony went beautifully. For a few blissful hours, I forgot all about Ryan and the awkwardness. But then came the reception. After dinner, people started giving toasts. My dad, my maid of honor, Claire, and the best man all gave their speeches. Then, out of nowhere, Ryan stood up. I felt my chest tighten immediately. He wasn't on the speech list. He clinked his glass and started talking about love being in the air and how witnessing two people commit to forever makes you realize when you've found your forever too. The entire room went dead silent. Claire gasped, and I could see her hand fly to her mouth. I didn't even think. I walked straight up to him, took the microphone, and said as calmly as I could, "Ryan, please sit down. This is not the time." He looked stunned. People were whispering. My mom was mortified. Jake quickly came over and took my hand while Ryan awkwardly sat down, muttering something about me ruining the magic. Claire, meanwhile, started crying and ran out of the room. I followed her outside, and she screamed at me, asking why I had to embarrass her fiancé like that in front of everyone. I told her he'd been told multiple times not to do this, and that I wasn't going to let him hijack my wedding. She yelled that I was jealous and couldn't stand her having a happy moment. I told her it wasn't about jealousy, it was about respect. She refused to come back inside. My mom ended up going to console her, and the rest of the night was tense. Some guests clearly felt uncomfortable, But most people carried on and had fun after a while. The next day, I got a flood of texts. Some from family saying I'd overreacted, that it would have been romantic, and that I ruined a beautiful moment. Others said I was absolutely right and that Ryan was out of line. My dad was firmly on my side, saying he couldn't believe the audacity. My mom, though, said I could have just let him have his moment to keep the peace. It's been 3 months, and Claire still isn't really speaking to me. She said I humiliated her and that Ryan didn't mean any harm. She's convinced that if I'd just gone along with it, everyone would have thought it was sweet and we'd all have a good memory instead of drama. I don't know anymore. Part of me wonders if I should have just let it happen. After all, it would have been over in a few minutes. But another part of me feels that if I hadn't said something, my wedding would have been remembered for their engagement instead of our marriage. The situation has only gotten weirder. Apparently, Ryan proposed 2 weeks later at a family dinner, and Claire said yes. But she didn't invite me. My mom told me afterward that she didn't want any more scenes. Now, they're planning their wedding for next summer and have pointedly not asked me to be in the bridal party, even though Claire was my maid of honor. Jake thinks I should just let it go and focus on us, but it's really bothering me. I don't regret standing my ground, but I hate that it's caused so much distance between me and my sister. We were always close growing up, and I feel like this one event shattered that. She's still claiming that I made a huge deal over nothing, but to me, it wasn't nothing. I spent over a year planning that day. I poured my heart, time, and money into it, and I made my boundaries clear. It wasn't about her or Ryan. It was about Jake and me finally celebrating something that was ours. Now my mom keeps hinting that I should apologize just to smooth things over before Claire's wedding. But I genuinely don't think I did anything wrong. I didn't scream, I didn't cause a scene, I just stopped one. So, Reddit, am I really the jerk for refusing to let my sister's fiancé propose at my wedding, even though it's torn our family apart? AITA for refusing to let my sister and her kids move into my house after she lost hers, even though I have plenty of space? So, this has blown up way more than I expected, and honestly, I feel like I'm losing my mind trying to figure out whether I'm being heartless or if my sister is just taking advantage of me. I, 35F, bought my first home 2 years ago after saving for nearly a decade. It's a 4-bedroom house in a small town, nothing luxurious, but big enough that I finally feel like I can breathe. I grew up poor, constantly moving because my mom couldn't afford rent, and I swore I'd never live like that again. I budgeted, worked 2 jobs, skipped vacations, and basically built this life from the ground up. My sister, Megan, 33F, took a very different path. She got married young, had 3 kids, now 10, 8, and 5, and has always lived kind of paycheck to paycheck. Her husband, Kyle, bounces between jobs. He's never stuck with one for more than a year, and they've always been in some kind of financial trouble. I've helped before, paying bills, covering Christmas gifts, and even co-signing a car loan, which of course she defaulted on and left me to handle. Anyway, about a month ago, Megan called me in full panic mode. They've been evicted from their rental home because they were behind 4 months on rent. She asked if they could stay with me just for a little while until they got back on their feet. Now, I'll admit, my first instinct was to say yes. She's my sister, and her kids are my nieces and nephew. But I also know her just for a little while never actually means that. When she lived with our mom years ago, she stayed for 2 years rent-free, contributing almost nothing, leaving the place trashed, and making our mom's life miserable. So I told her I needed a day to think about it. That night, I sat down and tried to figure out what this would actually look like. I work from home as a graphic designer, so I need a quiet space. I also have 2 dogs who aren't used to kids running around. The house has the 4 bedrooms, but one is my office, one is my guest room, one is mine, and the last is more of a storage/craft space. If they moved in, I'd lose my workspace, my privacy, and probably my sanity. Plus, I know Megan doesn't discipline her kids. They're good kids, but they're wild. So the next day, I told her that while I love her, I couldn't have them move in. I offered to help in other ways. I said I'd pay for 2 weeks at a motel while they looked for a new place or help her find local shelters or programs that could assist them. She went silent for a second and then said, "You'd really let your own sister and her children be homeless?" I said I wasn't letting them be anything. I was offering alternatives, but I couldn't live with them. She hung up on me. A few days later, my mom called, furious. Megan had apparently told her that I refused to help and that her kids were sleeping in their car. My mom said she couldn't take them because she lives in a one-bedroom apartment, but she insisted that I should, since I have a whole house to myself. I explained my reasoning, and my mom said sometimes family is more important than comfort. I asked her if she'd be willing to let them stay with her if she had more space, and she said, of course, which I found ironic, considering she didn't have to put that to the test. I stuck to my decision, but the guilt started eating at me. I called Megan again and said I'd cover a month of a motel stay if she could find one that would take them. She said no, that motels weren't safe for kids, and that she'd rather stay with someone who actually cares. Then, a week later, I found out through a mutual friend that she and her family were now staying with one of Kyle's cousins in a nearby town. Apparently, the cousin's place is small, but at least they have a roof. I thought that was the end of it, but last weekend, we had a small family get-together for my mom's birthday, and the tension was unbearable. Megan barely looked at me. At one point, she loudly told someone that I chose peace and quiet over my own blood. Everyone got awkwardly silent, and I just said, I chose boundaries. After that, the rest of the night was cold. My mom texted me later saying I'd embarrassed my sister and made her feel like a failure. I told her that I didn't mean to, but that I wasn't going to apologize for protecting the home I worked hard for. Here's where I might be the asshole. I've been second-guessing whether I could have done more. My mortgage isn't small, but I could have technically afforded to have them here for a couple of months. Maybe it would have been chaotic, but maybe it would have helped them get back on track. My mom keeps saying, you'll understand when you have kids, and my best friend even said that if it were her sister, she'd have let them move in without hesitation. But I also keep thinking back to all the times I helped Megan before and how it always ended with me cleaning up the mess. She never seems to learn from the consequences. If I'd said yes, it might have just been another situation where I ended up resentful, exhausted, and trapped in my own home. I just didn't want to go through that again. Still, every time I sit in my quiet living room, I can't shake the image of those kids sleeping in a car, even if it was just for a few nights. Some relatives have started treating me differently, less warm, more judgmental. My uncle said I should have done the Christian thing. My cousin told me I was too comfortable with boundaries. Megan hasn't spoken to me in nearly a month, and my mom's communication with me has been reduced to short, guilt-laden texts. The thing is, I do love my family. I just also love my peace. I worked my whole life to finally feel safe and stable, and I'm scared that if I give that up once, I'll never get it back. So now I'm sitting here wondering, was I actually protecting my peace, or was I being selfish? AITA for refusing to let my sister and her kids move in when I had the space to help them, but didn't want to sacrifice my stability to do it? AITA for refusing to let my sister move back in after she ruined my wedding? So I, 29F, got married 6 months ago to my husband, Daniel, 31M. It was supposed to be the happiest day of my life, and honestly, for a few hours it was. But my older sister, Claire, 33F, managed to turn it into one of the most humiliating and stressful experiences I've ever had. And now, she's begging to move in with us after being kicked out of her apartment, and I'm being called heartless for saying no. A bit of backstory. Claire has always been dramatic. She's the kind of person who somehow ends up at the center of every event, whether it's a dinner, a birthday, or even a funeral. Growing up, my parents always brushed it off as that's just how she is, but it meant that I spent my entire life living in her shadow. I was the quiet one, the nice one, the one who got ignored when she started crying or storming out of the room. Despite everything, I've always tried to keep a good relationship with her. When she got divorced 3 years ago, I let her crash at my apartment for 6 months rent-free. I helped her find a new place, helped her furnish it, even lent her money she never paid back. But I told myself it didn't matter. She's family, and she was going through a tough time. Fast forward to my wedding. Claire was my maid of honor, mostly because my mom guilt-tripped me into it. Claire insisted on planning my bachelorette party and the bridal shower, and both ended up being more about her than me. The bachelorette was at a club she liked. I wanted something small, and she got so drunk she made a scene with the bartender. At the shower, She gave a speech about how she taught me everything I know about men and told embarrassing stories about my teenage crushes. But I swallowed it all because I wanted peace and a good wedding day. On the day of the wedding, everything seemed fine at first. She showed up late to hair and makeup but blamed traffic. She complained that her dress didn't fit right, even though she chose it, and she made faces during the photos. But I kept my cool. I just wanted to marry Daniel and move on. The ceremony went beautifully until the reception. After a few drinks, Claire decided she wanted to make an impromptu toast. My maid of honor speech had already happened earlier, and it wasn't bad, so I assumed she just wanted to say something nice. I was wrong. She grabbed the mic and started off with a few jokes that were okay, but then began talking about Daniel. How she was the one who introduced us, not true, how he used to flirt with her before realizing I was the better sister, and how everyone thought he'd end up with her. The room went silent. Daniel looked furious, and I wanted to disappear. She ended her speech by saying, "I'm so glad he finally figured out which sister was right for him." I walked out in tears. My mom followed me, saying Claire didn't mean it like that, and that I shouldn't ruin the night over a joke. Daniel's parents were livid, and several guests left early because of the awkwardness. Daniel and I managed to salvage the evening, but it was a dark cloud over what should have been perfect. After the honeymoon, I confronted Claire. I told her how hurt and humiliated I was, and she just shrugged it off. She said, "You're overreacting. It was a joke. People need to lighten up." I told her I needed space and that she wasn't welcome at our house for a while. She didn't apologize, but she did send a text a week later that said, "Hope you're done being mad." I didn't respond. We didn't speak for months. Now, last week, she showed up at my door in tears. Her landlord apparently sold the building, and she has to move out within 30 days. She said she can't find an affordable place and asked if she could stay with me and Daniel just for a few months. I immediately said no. She begged, saying she had nowhere else to go. She promised she'd be on her best behavior, that she'd pay rent, which I know she can't afford, and that this would be a chance for us to reconnect as sisters. When I refused again, she got angry. She accused me of holding a grudge and choosing a man over family. She even called my husband controlling because he was standing next to me when I said no. Then she stormed off, crying and yelling that I was abandoning her. Now my parents are furious with me. They keep calling, saying I'm being cruel, that Claire is family and family helps each other. I reminded them that I helped her for 6 months before, and she repaid me by humiliating me at my wedding. They said I should be the bigger person and let the past go. Daniel fully supports my decision. He said he'll move out himself if I ever let her in because he doesn't want to deal with her drama again. I don't blame him. He's been nothing but patient through this entire mess. But I still feel guilty. I know she's in a tough spot, and even though she's been awful to me, the idea of her being homeless makes me feel sick. My parents keep saying I'll regret it if something bad happens to her, and I keep replaying her crying at my door. But at the same time, every part of me knows that letting her in would destroy my peace, my marriage, and probably my sanity. Part of me wonders if this is just another manipulation tactic. She's always been able to get her way when she plays the victim. My mom even said she wouldn't be in this situation if you'd been more supportive after her divorce. Like, what does that even mean? I supported her for half a year. Now some relatives are messaging me saying I'm heartless, that you don't turn away blood, and one even said sisters fight, but they don't exile each other. I feel like everyone's forgetting what she did and how much damage she caused. I told my mom that if they're so worried, they can take her in. My mom said they don't have space because my dad uses the spare room for his hobbies. That about sums it up. They want me to clean up their mess again, but they won't lift a finger themselves. So now I'm stuck between my conscience and my boundaries. I don't want to be a monster, but I also don't want to live in chaos again. AITA for refusing to let my sister move in after she destroyed my wedding and never apologized. AITA for refusing to let my sister and her kids move into my house after she lost hers, even though I have more than enough space. I, 35F, own a 4-bedroom house that I bought 5 years ago after saving like crazy and working multiple jobs for most of my 20s. I'm single, no kids, and my home is something I'm really proud of. I grew up in a chaotic household where money was always tight, and my parents constantly leaned on me to help with bills since I started working at 16. Having financial stability now feels like something sacred to me. My younger sister, 32F, Emma, has 3 kids, 9, 7, and 4. She was married to a guy named Chris, but they recently got divorced after he cheated on her. He moved out, and she got the house in the divorce, except she didn't handle the mortgage well. She was already behind on payments when they split, and instead of downsizing or getting financial advice, she kept trying to maintain the same lifestyle. She'd still go on weekend trips, post brunch photos every Sunday, buy the kids new iPads, that kind of thing. A few weeks ago, she called me crying. The bank had foreclosed on her house, and she and the kids needed to move out within a month. I immediately offered to help her look for rentals and said she and the kids could stay with me for a couple of weeks while she found something new. But when we sat down to talk, it turned out she expected to move in indefinitely. She said that since I live alone and have so much space, it only made sense for her and the kids to stay until she gets back on her feet. When I asked how long that might be, she said, well, maybe a year or 2. I told her that wasn't possible. I love my sister and my nieces and nephew, but I also value my peace and privacy. I work from home, and I've designed my space around quiet and independence. I also have a dog who isn't great with kids. I said I could host them for a couple of months max while she found something more permanent. She immediately got defensive, saying I was choosing my house over my family. She brought up how our parents always struggled and how family never turn each other away. I reminded her that our parents also ended up broke and dependent on me because they never set boundaries, and that I wasn't going to repeat that cycle. She got upset and said I was being cold and selfish. Apparently, she told our parents too, because they both called me separately to guilt trip me. My mom said, "You're her sister. Those kids are your blood. You can't just watch them struggle." My dad added that if he'd had a house like mine when we were younger, he'd have opened the doors without hesitation. I reminded them that they used to let relatives move in all the time, and it always ended with fighting, resentment, and financial stress. I don't want that. They said that was different because times were tougher back then. I countered that times are always tough for someone, and that's exactly why I want to protect my stability. Things escalated when Emma showed up at my house with her kids one evening, claiming she had nowhere else to go. She said she'd already told her landlord she was moving out and that she'd packed up her things. I was shocked. I told her I hadn't agreed to anything yet, but she said, "Well, you have now. I can't take them to a shelter." I refused to let her move in. It was awful. The kids were crying, she was screaming, and I ended up calling my parents to come get her. My mom showed up furious and said I'd turned away my own family in their darkest hour. I told her I'd warned him not to do this, but she didn't listen. Since then, the entire family has turned against me. My parents barely speak to me. My brother, 29M, called to say that while he gets where I'm coming from, he also thinks I could have just let her stay for a while because family should come first. I've tried to explain that it's not just about space. It's about boundaries and mental health. Emma and I have a complicated relationship. She's always been impulsive, and I've always been the one cleaning up her messes. When she was in college, she ran up $5,000 on my credit card just to get by and promised to pay me back. She never did. When her car broke down 3 years ago, I lent her $2,000 for repairs. I never saw that back either. I love her, but history has shown that once she moves into my space or into my financial life, it's nearly impossible to get her out again. I don't want to be stuck raising her kids or supporting her indefinitely while she avoids taking responsibility. A few mutual friends have said I'm being heartless and that kids shouldn't have to suffer for adult mistakes. One even offered to start a GoFundMe for her, but Emma refused, saying it would be humiliating. She told everyone I care more about my floors and my dog than my own niece and nephews. I keep thinking maybe I could have done more. Maybe I should have just set stricter rules, like a firm move-out date, and let her stay temporarily. But honestly, I don't think she would have respected that boundary. I know her. She would have treated the deadline as optional and guilt-tripped me when it came time to leave. I did end up helping her find a small 2-bedroom rental about 40 minutes away. I even paid the deposit to get her started, but she barely thanked me. She told my mom I was throwing money at the problem because I didn't want to actually help. Now I feel completely alienated from my family. My parents keep hinting that they'll never forget what I did. Emma only texts when she needs something, and the kids aren't allowed to call me because Annie doesn't want to be bothered. I know this will probably sound harsh, but I feel lighter now that I'm not dealing with her constant chaos. My house is peaceful, my routine is stable, and I'm sleeping better than I have in months. Still, the guilt hits hard sometimes. I can't shake the feeling that maybe I failed as a sister. So, Reddit, am I the asshole for refusing to let my sister and her kids move in with me, even though I had the space? AITA for refusing to attend my brother's child-free wedding because my 9-year-old daughter wasn't invited, even though his fiance's niece, same age, was? I, 33F, have a brother, Evan, 31M, who's getting married in December to his fiancée, Julia, 29F. We've always been close, or at least I thought we were, until this wedding planning situation completely blew up. Now, my parents think I'm ruining everything. Evan isn't speaking to me, and I'm questioning whether I really did overreact. Evan and I grew up in a pretty tight-knit family. We were the only 2 kids, and since our parents work a lot, we were basically each other's best friends. While I had my daughter, Lily, Evan was the first to meet her at the hospital. He's been an amazing uncle, always spoiling her with little gifts and calling her his mini-niece. That's why what's happening now feels like such a betrayal. When Evan and Julia got engaged last year, everyone was excited. Julia is sweet, kind of quiet, and I genuinely liked her. We all got along great. Julia doesn't have siblings, but she has a few cousins she's close with, including a 9-year-old niece by marriage, Ava, who's been part of her life since the kid was a baby. Julia calls Ava her favorite little person, and I thought was adorable. A few months ago, I received the save the date. Everything looked beautiful and very formal. It mentioned the wedding would be adult only. I didn't think much of it. I assumed there'd be exceptions for family kids, especially since Lily is literally Evan's only niece. But then, when the actual invitation came, I noticed my name only. No and family. No mention of Lily. I texted Evan right away, thinking it was a mistake. He didn't reply for a couple of days, then finally called me and said, yeah, so we decided to have a child-free wedding. It's just simpler that way. I was a bit surprised and asked, even Lily? He said, yeah, sorry, no kids at all. I was disappointed, but said I understood, even though it meant I need to find a sitter since the wedding is out of town. But then a week later, my mom casually mentioned how cute Ava's flower girl dress is going to be. I stopped dead. I said, wait, what? I thought it was child-free. My mom looked awkward and said, oh, well, Ava's the only exception. Julia really wanted her to be part of this ceremony. I called Evan again, angry this time. He confirmed that yes, Ava was going to be there as the flower girl. I said, so the wedding isn't child-free. It's just no Lily. He got defensive and said, it's not about Lily. It's about keeping it small and organized. Julia only wanted 1 kid involved to avoid chaos. I said, but that's literally favoritism. You're saying 1 kid is fine, but mine isn't? He said, Ava's practically Julia's niece, and it's her wedding. She wanted Ava there because she's been dreaming of that since she was little. That stung. I said, so my daughter, your niece, doesn't matter because she wasn't part of Julia's childhood fantasy? He told me not to make it personal and that it was just a wedding decision. He also added that kids can be distracting and they wanted a more elegant vibe. I told him Lily is incredibly well-behaved, but he just said, we're not opening that door. If we let 1 kid come, then other people will ask too. At that point, I said fine. But if Lily's not invited, neither am I. He thought I was bluffing. I wasn't. I told him I couldn't support an event that made my daughter feel excluded, especially when another child her age was given special treatment. He got really cold and said, that's your choice. But if you're not there, don't expect us to delay things or make exceptions later. When my parents found out, they were furious with me. My mom said I was punishing Evan for respecting his fiance's wishes and making his big day about adult boundaries. My dad said, you're making this about Lily when it's about them. But I couldn't shake the feeling that it was about Lily. that she was being treated as less than because she wasn't biologically connected to Julia. Julia actually called me a few days later to clear the air. She was polite, but clearly trying to smooth things over. She said she totally understood how I felt, but that Ava had been dreaming about this since she was 5, and she didn't want to disappoint her. She said, "I didn't mean to exclude Lily. I just wanted Ava there to fulfill that special role." I told her I appreciated the explanation, but it still felt hurtful that my daughter, who adores her uncle, wouldn't even get to attend. I thought that was the end of it. But then my parents organized a family dinner last weekend to try to patch things up. It turned into a complete disaster. Evan told me I was being dramatic and selfish for refusing to come, and Julia teared up, saying she felt like I was boycotting her wedding out of spite. My mom kept saying, "You'll regret missing your brother's wedding." I told them, "I'll regret that he made a choice that excluded my child." Evan said, "This is why we didn't want kids there. Too much emotion." Now I'm getting guilt-tripped from every direction. Some relatives say I'm standing up for my daughter, and that family should be treated equally. Others think I'm making a mountain out of a molehill and should just let it go, get a babysitter, and show up for my brother. But I can't shake how hypocritical it feels, calling a child free while still including one special child. It feels like they wanted to avoid kid energy, unless the kid was cute enough for photos. Evan and I haven't spoken since that dinner. My mom keeps trying to convince me to just show up and don't cause more tension, but every time I think about it, I feel sick. Lily keeps asking if she's going to Uncle Evan's wedding, and I just tell her, "Not this time, sweetie." She said, "Did I do something bad?" That broke me. She didn't deserve to feel that way. Part of me wonders if I'm overreacting, that maybe this is just how weddings go, and it's not worth a family rift. But another part of me feels like if I back down, I'm teaching my daughter that it's okay to accept being treated as less special for the sake of keeping peace. So Reddit, am I the *** hole for refusing to attend my brother's child-free wedding because they excluded my daughter while making an exception for someone else's? AITA for refusing to let my brother and his fiancée move into my house after they got evicted, even though I have plenty of space? I, 34F, own a 4-bedroom house that I bought 5 years ago after saving for nearly a decade. I live alone except for my dog, Milo, and I work from home as a freelance graphic designer. I'm proud of what I've built for myself because I grew up in a family where money was always tight and stability was something we dreamed about but never really had. My younger brother, Jake, 30M, has always been the more free-spirited one. He bounced from job to job, lived with our parents on and off until his mid-20s, and has always had a bit of a chip on his shoulder about the fact that I'm more responsible. His fiancée, Marissa, 28F, is nice enough on the surface, but she's very opinionated and tends to treat people's things as communal. A few months ago, Jake and Marissa got evicted from their apartment. According to them, their landlord was unreasonable, but after talking to my mom, I learned they hadn't paid rent for 3 months because they were saving up for their wedding. When I heard that, I honestly thought they were joking. Who prioritizes a wedding over keeping a roof over their head? Anyway, after the eviction, they started couch surfing with friends, but that got old fast. 2 weeks ago, I got a call from my mom asking if they could stay with me just for a little while until they got back on their feet. I hesitated because I've lived alone for years and love my peace and privacy. But my mom made me feel guilty. She said, "You've got all that space. They're family. You want help if you were in trouble." I agreed to let them come over to talk it through. When they arrived, I immediately felt uneasy. Marissa looked around like she was inspecting a hotel, commenting on how big and empty it felt. Jake made jokes about how he could finally have his gaming room. They didn't even ask what I was comfortable with. They just assumed moving in was a done deal. I asked about their plan to get back on their feet, jobs, saving, anything, and they both got defensive. Marissa said, "We just need a place to stay until after the wedding. Then everything will fall into place." When I asked how long until after the wedding was, she said, "Next summer." It's currently October. They wanted to move in for almost 9 months. I told them that was too long and that I couldn't commit to that. Jake accused me of being selfish and obsessed with control. He said, "You've got 4 bedrooms and you live here alone with a dog. You wouldn't even notice we were here. That's when I told him the truth. I wouldn't notice. I work from home, I need quiet, and I value my space. I also reminded him that it's not my job to fix the consequences of their choices. Marissa started crying and saying she didn't realize I thought they were such a burden. Then she said something that made my blood boil. Maybe if you weren't single and lonely, you wouldn't mind having people around. I told him that was enough and that the answer was no. Jake called me cold and heartless and stormed out. A few hours later, my mom called me in tears, saying Jake and Marissa were staying with her for now, but it was cramped and stressful. She said I was tearing the family apart and that I needed to be the bigger person. I told her I was done being guilt-tripped for having boundaries. Then, last weekend, I hosted a small get-together with some coworkers. I posted a few photos on social media. Nothing fancy, just us in the backyard. Apparently, Jake saw them because he texted me, "Glad you have space for parties, but not for family." That message stung more than I expected. I started second-guessing myself. I do have extra rooms. I could have made it work, technically. But deep down, I know it wouldn't have been temporary. Jake has a habit of taking advantage of people's kindness until they finally snap. Even my dad, who's usually on my side, said I might have been too harsh and should have offered at least a few months. But I can already picture what would happen. They'd move in, stop looking for jobs seriously, argue about wedding planning, and somehow make me the villain for not helping enough. I've seen this movie before, just not in my house. The worst part is my relationship with my family is strained now. My mom barely talks to me. Jake blocked me on social media. And even though I know I made the logical decision, I can't shake the guilt. A few nights ago, my mom sent me a long text saying, "Family isn't about convenience. You're lucky to be where you are, but you've forgotten where you came from." That hit hard, because she's right. I am lucky, but I also work my ass off for it. I've gone through years of scrimping, saving, and saying no to things so I could build a life that felt safe. Now, the people who watch me struggle are acting like I owe them my space simply because I succeeded. It's not like I told them to sleep on the streets. I even offered to cover a motel for a week so they could figure something out. They refused because, according to Jake, you're trying to throw money at the problem instead of being a sister. My therapist, yes, I talked about it in therapy, told me it sounds like my family has blurred boundaries and that saying no is healthy, even if it's uncomfortable. Still, I can't help but wonder if there's a kinder middle ground I missed. I thought maybe after a few weeks, things would calm down. But yesterday, I got a wedding invitation in the mail from Jake and Marissa. The envelope had to Anna and guest written on it, but inside there was a sticky note that said, "If you're done being angry, maybe we can start over." I don't even know what that means. Angry? I'm not angry. I'm exhausted. Now, my parents are hinting that I should offer my house as the backup venue for their wedding in case their outdoor location doesn't work out. My mom said, "It would be poetic, you turning things around and showing love." That comment just sealed it for me. I told her no again, politely but firmly. She sighed and said, "You'll regret pushing everyone away one day." So now I'm sitting here, surrounded by the peace and quiet I worked for, feeling both justified and kind of hollow. AITA for refusing to let them move in, even though I had the room and they're my family. AITA for refusing to attend my sister's redo wedding after she turned my original wedding into her engagement party. So this whole mess started about 2 years ago, but it's all blowing up again now. My sister, Jenna, 32F, and I, 29F, have always had a rocky relationship. Growing up, she was the golden child, straight A's, cheerleader, parents' favorite, etc. I was the quiet one who preferred books and small groups over the spotlight. Despite that, I've always tried to keep the peace. When my fiancé, Liam, proposed 3 years ago, it was one of the happiest days of my life. Jenna had been with her boyfriend, Chris, for about 6 years at that point, and everyone was waiting for them to get engaged. They were the power couple of the family. High-paying jobs, nice apartment, fancy vacations. When Liam and I announced our engagement, Jenna looked shocked for a second, but quickly smiled and said she was happy for me. I believed her. Fast forward to our wedding planning. Because we were paying for most of it ourselves, we booked a small but elegant venue and planned a guest list of around 60 people. We sent out invites about 8 months before the date. Jenna was my maid of honor, and though she made a few passive-aggressive comments about my budget wedding, I let them slide. A few months before the big day, Jenna called me out of the blue and said she and Chris had exciting news. They had gotten engaged. I congratulated her and told her how thrilled I was. Then she said something that made my stomach drop. She asked if it would be okay to share my wedding day to announce their engagement to everyone since all the family and friends would already be gathered. I told her absolutely not. I said that day was for me and Liam. I didn't want anything taking the focus away from our wedding. She sounded annoyed, but said she understood. Or so I thought. Our wedding day arrived. Everything was beautiful at first. The ceremony went smoothly, and I was genuinely happy. But during the reception, right after dinner, Jenna got up with a glass of champagne. I assumed she was going to give her maid of honor speech. Instead, she tapped her glass and said, "Everyone, can I have your attention?" Then she announced that she and Chris were engaged and would be getting married the following year. People clapped, cheered, and immediately swarmed her. Half the guests went to congratulate them. My husband and I just stood there completely stunned. My mother was crying tears of joy for Jenna. My father gave Chris a hug. The rest of the night turned into a de facto engagement party for them. Even the DJ started playing their favorite songs after my mom requested it. I was heartbroken. I confronted Jenna after the reception, asking how she could do that when I'd explicitly told her not to. She just said, "Relax, it's not like I got married at your wedding. Everyone's happy. Why are you making it about you?" I didn't speak to her for months after that. My parents told me I was being dramatic and that family moments are meant to be shared. I eventually decided to forgive her enough to keep some peace, but our relationship has never been the same. Now here's where things get messy again. Jenna and Chris are finally getting married in 2 weeks. She's planning this huge, extravagant destination wedding in Italy. My husband and I were invited, but declined because traveling abroad with our 1-year-old would be stressful and expensive. I sent my regrets months ago and thought that was that. Last week, Jenna called me sobbing. Apparently, several family members and friends have dropped out of attending because the costs are too high. She's now furious that no one is supporting her big day and begged me to reconsider, even offering to pay part of our travel costs. I told her I appreciated the offer, but that we couldn't make it work logistically. She then said something that made my blood boil. She said, "You owe me this. You ruined the happiest day of my life when you made me feel unwelcome at your wedding. You should at least be there for mine." I snapped. I told her she had a lot of nerve saying I ruined her day when she hijacked my wedding for her engagement. I told her that her wedding wasn't about me, and mine hadn't been about her, but she couldn't seem to grasp that concept. I said she was selfish, entitled, and incapable of letting anyone else have a moment in the spotlight. She started crying harder and hung up. My mom then called me the next day, furious, saying I'd crushed Jenna's spirit before her big day and that I needed to apologize and go to the wedding to show I'm not holding a grudge. She said, "She's your sister. Family forgives." But honestly, I don't feel like forgiving. I feel like I've spent my whole life shrinking myself to make Jenna comfortable. When she turned my wedding into her announcement, it felt like the final straw. I don't want to sit through a week-long Italian wedding pretending everything is fine while she basks in the attention she stole from me once before. My husband is supportive and says he'll back whatever decision I make, but he did admit that skipping might cause a long-term rift with my family. He thinks we should take the high road, but I'm just so tired of being the bigger person. Now the family group chat is blowing up with people picking sides. Some are calling me petty, saying it was years ago and I should move on. Others quietly messaged me saying they totally understand, but can't say so publicly because they don't want to deal with Jenna's wrath. Part of me wonders if I'm overreacting. Maybe I should let it go and just attend to keep the peace. But the other part of me, the one that remembers standing alone at my own reception while everyone congratulated my sister, can't stomach the idea of smiling through her vows like nothing happened. AITA for refusing to go to her wedding after what she did to mine? Hey friends, if you enjoy this content, don't forget to like the video and share your thoughts in the comments. We really want to know what you like and what can be improved. What do you think of the video? Are there any topics you'd like to see in future videos? Your feedback really helps us get better. Thanks for being with us. AITA for refusing to attend my sister's wedding because of her guest list rules. So, this is going to be a long one, but I feel like context is necessary. I, 28F, have a younger sister, Emily, 25F, and she's always been a bit controlling, especially when it comes to social situations. Lately, it's gotten worse because she's planning her wedding. She's marrying a guy named David, 27M, who I've never particularly had issues with, but he's also not very socially aware, and they seem to feed off each other's elitist tendencies. Here's where things get complicated. Emily and David have decided to make their wedding small and intimate, which is fine in theory. But their definition of small and intimate apparently does not include immediate family in the way you would expect. They're only inviting people who are deemed socially acceptable in their circle. That means my parents, my older brother, and his family are all invited, but me and my fiancé, 29M, are only allowed if we agree to follow a long list of very strict rules they've outlined. These rules are, frankly, ridiculous. They sent me an 8-page Google Doc titled Guest Guidelines that includes the following. Dress code specifics down to the type of undergarments we should wear apparently. Black is only acceptable if accessorized with gold, otherwise not. Dress code specifics down to the type of undergarments we should wear apparently. Black is only acceptable if accessorized with gold, otherwise not. Instructions about where to sit during the ceremony, which apparently cannot conflict with their preferred photo angles. Instructions about where to sit during the ceremony, which apparently cannot conflict with their preferred photo angles. A requirement to avoid any conversation about politics, religion, or even recent pop culture controversies. A requirement to avoid any conversation about politics, religion, or even recent pop culture controversies. A rule that if anyone in the family has children under the age of 10, those children cannot interact with the couple in any way unless supervised by a designated child coordinator. A rule that if anyone in the family has children under the age of 10, those children cannot interact with the couple in any way unless supervised by a designated child coordinator. Explicit instructions on when and how to take pictures and the approved emojis for social media posts. Explicit instructions on when and how to take pictures and the approved emojis for social media posts. Now, Emily and David are normally reasonable people in casual settings, but the level of control here is absurd. It felt like a job application rather than a wedding invitation. I sent back a polite email asking if the guidelines were negotiable, especially regarding the seating and dress code. Their response was basically, no, these rules are non-negotiable. If you cannot comply, please RSVP no. I was stunned. I mean, this is my sister. We've had our disagreements growing up, but I didn't think a wedding could feel like a corporate audit. I told my fiancé what was going on, and we both agreed that we simply could not attend under these conditions. Not only would it make us uncomfortable, but it would also create tension in front of their friends and extended family. So I sent an RSVP saying we would not be attending. Emily called me immediately, furious. She accused me of being dramatic and selfish, claiming I was trying to ruin her special day and that I clearly didn't love her if I couldn't just follow a few simple rules. I tried to explain that it wasn't about not loving her. It was about feeling controlled and disrespected in my own family environment. But she wouldn't hear it. She said that since I wasn't attending, I was basically cutting myself out of the family, and that I had chosen a stranger over my own sister. My parents are caught in the middle. They think Emily is overreacting, but also feel some guilt because Emily is their youngest, and they want her to have her perfect day. My brother has been quietly supporting me, saying that the rules are absurd and that Emily has a history of being controlling, but he's also trying to avoid conflict with her. Meanwhile, some mutual friends have weighed in online because Emily apparently vented to them about my sister refusing to be part of a perfect wedding. And now I've gotten texts from people I barely know saying I'm being unreasonable. Some of them think I should just suck it up and go, saying it's her day, she can have rules. Others agree that this is excessive. I feel like I'm stuck between respecting my sister's wishes and maintaining my own boundaries. Part of me worries I'm overreacting and will regret missing her wedding. But another part of me feels like if I attend under these conditions, I'll be miserable and it will probably make the relationship worse in the long run. The final straw was when Emily told our parents she wants to cut me out of family events in the future because I clearly do not respect her choices. That felt like an ultimatum, and honestly, I cannot accept being treated like that, especially by my own sister. So, AITA for refusing to attend my sister's wedding because of what I feel are overly controlling and ridiculous rules. Some additional context that people might need. I've always been on reasonably good terms with Emily, aside from occasional disagreements. I've always been on reasonably good terms with Emily, aside from occasional disagreements. My fiancé and I are very close to our extended families, so missing a wedding feels heavy. My fiancé and I are very close to our extended families, so missing a wedding feels heavy. We offered to celebrate with them in another way, like hosting a post-wedding dinner or giving a gift, but she said it wouldn't be the same and rejected the idea entirely. We offered to celebrate with them in another way, like hosting a post-wedding dinner or giving a gift, but she said it wouldn't be the same and rejected the idea entirely. The wedding is still months away, so there's technically time to reconcile, but Emily seems set in her stance. The wedding is still months away, so there's technically time to reconcile, but Emily seems set in her stance. I'm trying not to burn bridges, but I also refuse to compromise on my sense of dignity and autonomy. I'm trying not to burn bridges, but I also refuse to compromise on my sense of dignity and autonomy. I want to be clear, I don't want to start a war, and I truly want to maintain a relationship with my sister. But the way she is handling this feels manipulative and controlling, and I genuinely cannot see a way to comply without feeling completely uncomfortable and resentful. So, Reddit, AITA here? AITA for refusing to attend my sister's child-free wedding after she demanded I leave my 12-year-old daughter at home. I, 36F, have a sister, Natalie, 32F, who has always been the golden child in our family. She's ambitious, successful, and incredibly image-conscious. Growing up, my parents often compare me to her, and though we have a decent relationship now, there's always been an undercurrent of rivalry, mostly on her part, if I'm being honest. I'm a single mom to my daughter, Lily, 12F. Her dad left when she was a baby, and since then it's been just the two of us. Lily is polite, calm, and mature for her age. She's the type of kid adults often say you forget she's even there. She's into books, art, and gardening, not loud or disruptive. I don't think she's an angel, but she's definitely not the kind of kid who would cause problems at an event. Natalie got engaged last year to her fiancé, Aaron, 34M. He's nice enough, though a bit pretentious. They're planning a big, formal wedding in December at a fancy hotel ballroom. When she first told me, I was thrilled for her. I offered to help with planning, dress shopping, anything she needed. For months, everything seemed fine. Then, 2 weeks ago, I got my official wedding invitation. On the envelope, it said, "Ms. My name," no mention of Lily. I assumed it was just an oversight since Natalie and Lily are close. Natalie used to take her for ice cream, even called her mini-me. I texted her saying the invite probably missed Lily's name. Natalie replied with, "Oh no, it's not a mistake. We're having a child-free wedding." I was stunned. I knew some people preferred child-free weddings, but it just seemed odd given that Lily is family and not a toddler. I asked if she was serious, and she said yes, that they wanted a sophisticated, elegant atmosphere and no distractions or crying. I told her Lily isn't that kind of kid, but she doubled down, saying, "It's nothing personal, but rules are rules." So I said, "So your niece, who adores you, can't come to your wedding?" She replied, "It's not about her. We're not making exceptions for anyone." At first, I was upset but tried to respect her choice. However, the more I thought about it, the more it bothered me. Lily cried when I told her. She said, "I thought Aunt Natalie wanted me to be her flower girl." Natalie had even mentioned this idea months ago, but apparently changed her mind. I talked to my parents, thinking they'd talk some sense into her. But they said, "It's her day, her rules." My mom added, "It's only one day. Can't you find someone to watch Lily?" But I don't have anyone nearby I trust with her overnight, and honestly, I felt insulted. I told Natalie that if Lily wasn't invited, I wouldn't be coming either. I said it calmly, not as an ultimatum, just a boundary. She blew up. She said I was making her wedding about me, and that it was ridiculous to skip it over a small detail. I told her it's not small to exclude family, especially a child she claimed to love. Now she's furious. She said I'm being dramatic and punishing her for having standards. Aaron texted me later, saying, "We're disappointed. We thought you'd be supportive, but it seems you're trying to guilt trip Natalie." My parents took their side. My dad said I'm robbing Natalie of family support and embarrassing her. My mom told me, "You've always been jealous of your sister, and now you're showing it." That cut deep. Meanwhile, Lily feels awful. She keeps asking if she did something wrong. I told her absolutely not, that Aunt Natalie just made a choice we don't agree with. But I can see how much it hurt her. Then last weekend, Natalie posted a photo from her bridal shower on Instagram. The caption read, "So grateful for friends and family who love and support us. Can't wait to celebrate with all the adults who understand boundaries, LOL." That felt like a direct jab at me. To make things worse, I found out through a cousin that Natalie's fiancé's niece, who's 9, is invited as a junior attendant. When I confronted Natalie about that, she said, "That's different. She's part of the ceremony." I asked, "Did you even consider letting Lily do that?" And she said, "No, because I needed people I can rely on to follow directions." That stung. At this point, I told her I'm done arguing. I wished her a happy wedding day, but said I won't be attending. She called me cold and selfish and hung up. Now the family is split. My aunt and cousin agree with me, saying Natalie's being hypocritical. My parents think I'm bitter and petty. I'll admit part of me feels guilty because she's my sister and weddings are once-in-a-lifetime events. But another part of me feels like if I cave, I'm teaching Lily that people can exclude her and we should just accept it quietly. Last night, my mom called again, pleading with me to reconsider for family harmony. She said Natalie's been crying and that everyone will notice if I'm not there. I asked if Natalie noticed how her niece cried when she was told she wasn't welcome. Mom said, "She's a kid, she'll forget." That made me angry. Lily won't forget. She's at the age where she understands rejection. I still remember being left out of things Natalie got praised for when we were kids, and I don't want Lily to grow up feeling the same way. I don't hate my sister, but I've realized this is about more than one event. It's about respect. If Natalie really valued me and my daughter, she wouldn't have treated Lily like an inconvenience just to keep up appearances. The wedding is next weekend. I've already RSVP'd no. I'm planning to take Lily on a little weekend trip instead. Maybe a hiking trail or a cozy Airbnb. Something to remind her that family isn't defined by who invites you to fancy parties, but by who makes you feel wanted. Still, part of me wonders if I overreacted. I know weddings can be stressful, and Natalie's always been a perfectionist. Maybe this is her way of trying to control the chaos. Maybe I should have just gone, smiled for photos, and ignored the rest. But when I picture sitting there, knowing my daughter was deliberately excluded, I just can't do it. So, Reddit, AITA for refusing to attend my sister's wedding because she banned my daughter from coming? AITA for refusing to let my sister move back in after she destroyed my wedding because she wasn't feeling included? So I, 29F, got married 3 months ago to my husband, Leo, 31M. The wedding was beautiful, or at least it was supposed to be. We planned it for over a year, paid for everything ourselves, and made sure it was a day that celebrated not just us, but our families. The only dark cloud over the entire process was my younger sister, Emma, 26F. Emma and I have always had a complicated relationship. She's my parents' golden child, always been treated like the baby who can do no wrong. When we were kids, she'd ruin my stuff, lie about it, and I'd get in trouble for not sharing. As adults, I try to keep the peace. I thought she'd grown up. Spoiler, she hadn't. When Leo and I got engaged, Emma immediately asked to be my maid of honor. I told her that position was already going to my best friend, Nina, 30F, who's been like a sister to me since college. Emma pretended to be fine, but I could feel the tension. She made little digs like, "I guess blood doesn't matter to you," or "Nina's basically replacing me." I brushed it off because I didn't want drama. Fast forward to the wedding planning. Emma constantly inserted herself into things she wasn't invited to: dress fittings, vendor meetings, cake tastings, and criticized every decision I made. She said my dress was too plain, that the colors were boring, and that Leo's suit made him look like a waiter. I started distancing myself, which only made her more agitated. About 2 months before the wedding, Emma had a big meltdown at a family dinner, crying that I was excluding her from my most important life event. My parents took her side, of course, saying I should make her feel included. Against my better judgment, I agreed to let her do a reading during the ceremony. It was the easiest way to calm everyone down. Now, here's where things went completely off the rails. On the day of the wedding, everything started out fine. Emma showed up in her bridesmaid dress, after complaining it wasn't flattering enough, and we got through the morning preparations peacefully. During the ceremony, she walked down the aisle, took her seat, and waited for her turn to read. Except when she got up to the podium, she didn't read the passage I'd approved. Instead, she pulled out a completely different paper and started improvising. She said things like, "Marriage isn't about fake perfection like some people pretend. It's about real connection, and sometimes we lose ourselves trying to impress others instead of being authentic." It was painfully obvious she was taking shots at me. The guests looked uncomfortable. I was mortified. Afterward, Leo tried to keep things moving, but Emma kept drinking and sulking during the reception. At one point, she pulled Leo aside to talk privately. I saw them, and, assuming she was apologizing, didn't intervene. Later, Leo told me she'd actually confessed that she always had a crush on him and thought he could do better. When I confronted her, she laughed and said she was just joking and that I was being too uptight. I told her to leave the reception immediately. She made a scene, crying that I was humiliating her in front of everyone. Security had to escort her out. My parents were furious with me for ruining the family's image. We didn't speak for weeks after the wedding. I thought that was the end of it. But last month, Emma called me in tears, saying she'd been evicted because she couldn't make rent. She asked if she could stay with us for a few months until she got back on her feet. Leo immediately said no. He wanted nothing to do with her after what she'd said and done. I told Emma I couldn't let her move in, that her behavior at the wedding had crossed the line. She begged, saying she had nowhere else to go and that family is supposed to forgive. When I refused again, she exploded, calling me heartless and accusing me of choosing Leo over blood. Then my parents called. They said I was being cruel and holding a grudge over one bad day. My mom even said, "You can't turn your back on family when they're struggling." I told her Emma's struggles were of her own making and that I wasn't putting my marriage at risk for her. My dad tried to guilt-trip me by saying, "If this is how you treat your sister, I can't imagine how you'll handle your own children's mistakes." Now my family is divided. Some relatives say Emma's behavior was appalling and that I'm right to draw boundaries. Others think I'm being cold and unforgiving. My mom has even started hinting that Emma might show up at our house if she gets desperate, which makes me really uneasy. The worst part is I still feel a pang of guilt. I know she's struggling financially and emotionally, but I also can't ignore how toxic things have been. Every time I've tried to give her another chance, she's turned it into chaos. I keep asking myself if I'm being too harsh, or if I'm finally standing up for myself after years of letting her cross every boundary I set. Leo says we should cut her off completely and focus on our life together. Nina told me she's proud of me for finally saying no. But my parents keep calling and crying, saying I've broken the family apart. It's reached the point where I'm dreading every phone call. Last week, Emma posted a long rant on social media, saying that some people would rather let their sister sleep in her car than forgive her for being human. She didn't name me directly, but everyone knew who she was talking about. I started getting messages from mutual friends asking what happened. One even said, "I can't believe you do that to your own sister." Now I'm second-guessing everything. I hate drama, and I never wanted this to become a public spectacle. But I also feel like letting her move in would just invite more manipulation and chaos into my marriage. I love my family, but I also love my peace, and for once I want to protect it. So, AITA for refusing to let my sister move in after she destroyed my wedding and made my life miserable? AITA for not wanting to include my stepsister in my wedding, even though she technically raised me. I, 27F, am getting married next spring to my fiancée, 29M, and it's supposed to be one of the happiest times of my life. Instead, I'm getting guilt-tripped by half my family for not giving my stepsister, Ella, 33F, a major role in my wedding. The situation is complicated, and everyone seems to have a different version of events from when we were kids, but I'll try to explain as clearly as I can. My dad married Ella's mom when I was 8 and Ella was 14. My mom had passed away a year before, and my dad was barely keeping it together. Ella's mom, Linda, moved in with us pretty quickly. She wasn't awful, but she definitely saw me as baggage that came with my dad. She worked long hours and expected Ella to pick up a lot of the slack, meaning Ella became the one who helped me with homework, packed my lunches, and made sure I got to bed on time. For a long time, I thought of Ella as my sister. I followed her around everywhere, and she tolerated me, sometimes even seemed to enjoy having me around. But as I got older, I started realizing that she resented how much responsibility had been dumped on her. When she was 17, she started going out a lot, staying over at friends' places, and ignoring me when I asked to hang out. My dad would fight with her constantly about being selfish and not helping more. When Ella turned 18, she moved out and didn't talk to anyone for a while. I was heartbroken. I remember crying and begging my dad to call her, but he said she made her choice. That was basically the narrative in our house. Ella abandoned us. For years, that's what I believed. Fast forward to when I was 22. I found out through social media that Ella was back in town. She had a good job, an apartment, and was apparently on decent terms with her mom again. I reached out to her, thinking we could reconnect, but she was pretty cold. She said she'd love to grab coffee sometime, but months went by and it never happened. Eventually, I learned from her mom that Ella felt deeply hurt by how things went when she was younger. Apparently, my dad had relied on her way too much, and Linda had pressured her to be the adult in the house. She said she felt like her whole teenage life had been stolen from her because she was forced to take care of me and manage the household. Hearing that honestly broke me a little, but I also didn't know what to do with it. It wasn't my fault that I needed care. Over the years, we've kept minimal contact, just birthdays and holiday texts. When my fiancé and I got engaged last year, I made a list of people I wanted at my bridal party. My best friend since childhood is my maid of honor, and my 2 cousins and my fiancé's sister are my bridesmaids. I didn't even think to include Ella. But when word got around that I was planning, Linda called me out of the blue and asked if I was really not having Ella stand up there with me. I told her no, that we weren't that close. She said something like, "After everything that girl did for you, you're going to exclude her?" That rubbed me the wrong way. Yes, Ella helped take care of me when I was little, but that was because she was forced to. She didn't choose to be my caretaker. I never asked her to, and it feels wrong to pretend she was some kind of saintly big sister when the truth is she didn't want that role. A few days later, Ella texted me. She said she heard what Linda told me and wanted to clear the air. She said she doesn't expect to be a bridesmaid, but that she'd appreciate being acknowledged since she did raise me more than either of our parents did. That wording really bothered me. It felt like she was trying to claim some moral ownership of my childhood, like I owe her something. I told her I appreciated what she did, but that I don't see our relationship that way. I said she didn't raise me. She was a kid too, and it wasn't fair to put that on her. She responded that maybe not officially, but emotionally she had been my parent figure. She said it hurt, that I could erase that like it meant nothing. That turned into a full-blown argument. I said I'm not erasing anything, but I also won't build my wedding around a narrative that isn't true to how I experience things. My dad ended up hearing about it, thanks to Linda, obviously, and called to tell me I was being ungrateful. He said Ella sacrificed her teenage years for me and that this was my chance to honor that. Now my entire family is split. My cousins say I'm justified and that weddings are about who you're close to now, not childhood history. But my dad, Linda, and a few older relatives think I'm selfish and cruel. Here's where it gets messy. My fiancé thinks I might regret this. He said Ella's text sounded like she wanted closure more than recognition. He thinks that if I gave her even a small symbolic role, like a reading or speech, it might heal old wounds and make peace. But part of me resents the idea that I have to give someone a place of honor to keep them from being upset. Last week, Linda sent me an old photo album from when we were kids. Every photo is of Ella with me, feeding me, helping me tie my shoes, sitting with me at school events. There are almost none with my dad or Linda. Seeing those pictures made me feel awful. I can't deny that she was there constantly, but I still can't shake the feeling that she was there because she had to be, not because she wanted to. Now, Ella isn't responding to my texts, and Linda told me she might not come to the wedding at all. My dad said if she doesn't go, he might skip it too because he won't watch his daughters divided. I've been crying on and off for days because this whole thing makes me feel like a horrible person. I never wanted to minimize what Ella did, but I also don't want to rewrite my own story just to make everyone else comfortable. To me, she wasn't my mother figure. She was my older stepsister who happened to get stuck raising me. That's not something I feel comfortable celebrating as if it was her choice. So now I'm stuck wondering if I'm being stubborn or cold. Would it really kill me to just give her some kind of role for the sake of peace? Or would that be disrespecting both of us by pretending things were different than they really were? AITA for not including my stepsister in my wedding despite what she did for me when we were kids. AITA for refusing to help my sister financially after she got herself into a situation she could have avoided. So this is going to be long because the context is a bit messy, but I need an outside perspective because my family is split on this. I, 29F, have a younger sister, Claire, 26F. We grew up in a moderately middle-class household, nothing crazy, but we always had enough to be comfortable. Our parents did a lot for both of us growing up, but they also emphasized responsibility and planning for the future. Claire and I have always had very different approaches to money and life in general. I'm very organized. I save, I invest, and I try to live below my means. Claire is more spontaneous and kind of a live-in-the-moment type, which is fine most of the time, but it has led her into trouble before. Claire recently moved into a new apartment, and she decided to get a really expensive designer sofa set that was way above her budget. She claimed she could manage it with her savings and her paycheck. I tried to warn her, but she brushed it off, saying she had it all under control. Fast forward 2 months, and she suddenly called me in tears because she couldn't pay her rent. She had spent most of her savings on furniture and decorative stuff and hadn't left herself enough for essentials. She also had some credit card debt that she wasn't able to handle. At this point, I was shocked and a little frustrated. I told her that I couldn't just give her money because she needed to learn to manage her finances, and that if I helped her out now, she would just repeat the same mistakes. She got really angry and accused me of being heartless and unsupportive. I tried to explain that support doesn't mean bailing someone out of every bad decision. I offered to help her make a realistic budget, negotiate with her landlord, and even figure out ways to make some extra cash, but she didn't want advice. She wanted money. Our parents got involved after she called them crying too. They were both furious with me for not helping her and kept saying that family should always help each other. I argued that helping her now would only encourage poor behavior, and that part of being a family is being honest with each other, even when it's uncomfortable. This led to a huge family argument where my parents said I was cold and unloving, and Claire accused me of being selfish. The tension didn't end there. Claire went on to borrow from friends, but she ran into trouble there too, and her social circle started to get frustrated. At one point, she came over to my place, hoping to borrow some money from me again, and I said no. She started yelling and crying, saying I was supposed to be her sister and that I was betraying her. I held my ground, and she left, but she hasn't really spoken to me much since then. Since this whole situation, I've noticed that other family members are treating me differently at gatherings. They talk about how I don't have a heart and how I'm too strict. I do feel bad that she's struggling, but at the same time, I can't shake the feeling that giving her money would have just prolonged the problem. I've been supporting her in ways that don't involve giving her cash, like helping her write resumes, apply for better-paying jobs, and create a plan to tackle her debt, but she sees it as me being unsympathetic. The kicker is, after a few months of no contact, I heard through a mutual friend that Claire finally started budgeting and slowly paying off her debt. She even admitted privately that she had no plan for the money she spent on furniture and wished she had listened to me. She hasn't apologized directly, but I feel some vindication. Even with that, I can't help but feel guilty. I don't want to be estranged from my sister, and I know she's hurt. But I also believe that helping her financially would have been counterproductive, and I genuinely think I acted in her best interest, even if it was tough love. So, Reddit, AITA for refusing to give my sister money when she made bad financial choices, even though it caused a rift in the family. AITA for refusing to let my sister move back in with me after she blew up my engagement. I'm a 29-year-old woman, and this all started about a year ago when my younger sister, let's call her Jenna, 24, moved in with me. She'd broken up with her boyfriend, was between jobs, and didn't really have anywhere else to go. I own a small townhouse that I bought a few years ago, and while it's not huge, it has 2 bedrooms, and I figured it would be fine to help her out for a few months. At first, things were okay. Jenna helped out a bit with chores and was polite enough. But within 2 months, she started treating my place like her personal crash pad. She'd bring friends over at midnight on weekdays, eat all my groceries, and borrow my clothes and makeup without asking. When I brought it up, she'd laugh it off and say I was uptight. Around this time, I had just gotten engaged to my fiancé, Evan, 31. We'd been together for 4 years, and everyone who knew us said we were the definition of stable and boring, in a good way. We didn't really fight, we had similar goals, and we were saving up for a house. Jenna met him when she moved in, and I could tell she liked him, like really liked him. She would always find excuses to hang out when he came over, and she'd make little comments about how lucky I was to have someone like him. I thought it was harmless. Evan never seemed flirty or inappropriate, but things started to feel off. Once I walked into the kitchen and found them sitting at the counter laughing about some inside joke, and Jenna gave me this weird look like she was testing me. Later, I mentioned it to Evan, and he said I was overthinking things. Fast forward a few months. Jenna still hadn't gotten a job, and I was starting to lose my patience. She'd been looking, but her version of job hunting was scrolling through TikTok and complaining about how corporate life kills creativity. I gave her a deadline, 3 more weeks to find work, or she needed to start paying rent. She sulked for days and told me I was turning into mom. Then came the engagement party. My parents hosted it at their place, and most of our friends and family were there. It was supposed to be a happy night, but Jenna showed up late, wearing a white dress that looked suspiciously like a wedding gown. Everyone noticed. I tried to laugh it off, but my mom whispered to her that it was inappropriate, and Jenna just said, "Relax, it's just a dress." During the speeches, she got tipsy and made one of the most humiliating comments of my life. She grabbed the mic and said, "I just hope Evan knows what he's getting into. My sister can be a lot." Then she added, "Don't worry, Evan, if she ever drives you crazy, you know where to find me." Everyone laughed awkwardly, but I was mortified. After the party, I confronted her. She claimed it was a joke and that I was being too sensitive. Evan told her it wasn't cool, but he didn't seem as upset as I was. I was ready to tell her to move out, but my parents begged me not to cause family drama before the wedding. 2 weeks later, everything fell apart. Evan came over one night, acting weird, distant, and guilty. I thought he was just stressed from work, but then he dropped the bomb. Jenna had texted him saying she was in love with him. She'd apparently sent him a long message confessing her feelings and suggesting that he owed it to himself to see if they were really compatible before marrying me. I felt like my heart had been ripped out. Evan showed me the messages. He didn't respond to her except to say that it was inappropriate and that he loved me. I kicked Jenna out that night. She screamed that I was ruining her life, that I stole every good thing from her, and that Evan had led her on. My parents tried to mediate, but I told them I was done. For months after, Jenna tried to reach out. She sent letters apologizing, claiming she'd been depressed and that she didn't mean to sabotage anything. I ignored her. Evan and I eventually went through with the wedding, but honestly, it was hard to feel as excited as I should have. There was a cloud over everything. Fast forward to now. It's been almost a year since that happened. Evan and I are doing better. We started therapy and are trying to rebuild our trust. Jenna, on the other hand, apparently lost her apartment recently and has been couch hopping. Last week, my mom called me and said Jenna needed a place to stay just for a few weeks. I said, absolutely not. My mom got upset and said that family helps family and that Jenna has learned her lesson. My dad tried to stay neutral, but he hinted that maybe it was time to move on. I told them both that I will never feel comfortable having her in my home again, especially not when my husband lives here. Now I'm being called heartless and vindictive. My mom even said that Jenna is paying for one mistake for the rest of her life, and that I'm holding a grudge. But from my perspective, this wasn't a small mistake. She tried to steal my fiancé. She humiliated me in front of everyone. And now I'm supposed to open my home to her like nothing happened? Evan supports my decision completely. He said he'd move out himself before letting Jenna live here again, which I appreciate. But now my parents are barely speaking to me. My mom told me that if I don't help Jenna, she's done defending me to the rest of the family. Apparently, my aunt thinks I'm punishing Jenna out of jealousy. Jealousy of what? I honestly don't know. The guilt is eating at me a little, though. Jenna has made some genuinely sad posts online about being alone and wanting forgiveness. Part of me wonders if I should just let her stay for a week, just to ease the tension. But another part of me can't shake the feeling that letting her back into my home would be like inviting chaos back into my life. Every time I start to waver, I remember her standing in front of everyone at my engagement party, smirking in that white dress, and saying that my fiancé could find her if I drove him crazy. I remember the messages she sent to Evan. I remember how she looked at me as I kicked her out like I was the villain in her story. So here I am, wondering if I'm being too cold. Maybe people really can change, and maybe I should be the bigger person. But maybe some bridges are supposed to stay burned. AITA for refusing to let my sister move back in with me after she blew up my engagement and tried to steal my fiancé. AITA for refusing to attend my sister's wedding because of how she treated my husband. I, 32F, have always been close to my sister, 29F. Growing up, she was the type of sibling I could rely on, and for the most part, we got along really well. However, our relationship started to strain after she got engaged last year. I tried to be supportive, but some things began happening that made me increasingly uncomfortable. It all started when she announced her engagement. I was thrilled for her and immediately started helping her plan, offering to make decorations, coordinate with vendors, and even help with her dress shopping. I have some experience with event planning, and she was really enthusiastic about having me involved. Everything was fine until she got a bit more serious about her vision for the wedding. The first red flag was with the guest list. My husband, Jake, 34M, is a fairly quiet and reserved guy who doesn't have a huge social circle. He gets along with most people, but he isn't someone who thrives in big social situations. My sister told me she didn't want him at the rehearsal dinner because she thought he wouldn't fit the vibe. I was taken aback. I tried to explain that he's family too, and it's not fair to exclude him from an event that's supposed to celebrate family. But she brushed it off. I let it slide, thinking it was a minor thing. Things got worse as the wedding planning progressed. She began making comments about Jake that were incredibly passive-aggressive. For example, she once told me, "I just hope your husband can handle the kind of people we're inviting. I wouldn't want him to be uncomfortable." She also started asking me to limit how much time I spent with him at family events, because apparently he makes the energy awkward. I tried addressing it calmly. I told her that my husband is my partner, and I expected him to be treated with respect at family events. I also reminded her that she had previously expressed wanting him there to help with certain aspects of the wedding, like carrying decorations or helping set up tables. She claimed she didn't mean anything by her comments and that I was overreacting. Then came the final straw. About a month before the wedding, she sent me a long text detailing what she wanted me to wear, how I should behave, and specifically mentioned that Jake shouldn't interact with certain guests because he might embarrass her friends. I was furious. I responded politely but firmly, saying that I wouldn't ask him to change how he acts or to avoid certain people just to make her friends feel comfortable. I also said I needed to think about whether attending under those conditions was something I could do. After that, she started sending multiple texts and even calling me, saying that I was being unreasonable, selfish, and that I was putting my husband's feelings above my family. She even brought our parents into the argument, framing it as if I was the one creating drama and that I owed her this day. I stood my ground and explained that she was being unfair to Jake, who has never done anything to anyone, and that I couldn't support a wedding where he was deliberately excluded or treated poorly. We went back and forth for weeks. She said I was overreacting and that she had a vision for her day that I needed to respect. I said her vision was fine, but shouldn't involve singling out and humiliating family members. She said she didn't want to fight and that I should just come and be supportive. I realized at that point that attending would mean accepting behavior I couldn't morally support. So, a week before the wedding, I sent her a message saying I wouldn't be attending. I explained my reasons as clearly and calmly as possible, that I couldn't in good conscience attend a wedding where my husband would be intentionally ostracized and treated poorly. I told her I hoped she could understand and that I still wish her the best. Her reaction was worse than I imagined. She called me selfish, dramatic, and told me I had ruined her family. She said our parents were disappointed in me and that I was making everything about my husband. Our parents are still upset, but they haven't explicitly said anything to me yet. My husband fully supports my decision, and honestly, I feel relieved not to have to be in a toxic environment. Since then, a lot of mutual friends have reached out, saying things like, maybe you overreacted, or it's her wedding, you should just suck it up. I get that sentiment, but I also feel like asking someone to be treated poorly just to attend an event isn't reasonable. I don't want to lose my sister completely, but I also don't want to put my husband in a situation where he feels unwelcome or disrespected. I'm torn because I know weddings are important, and my sister is devastated. But at the same time, I feel like I made the right choice for my family. AITA for refusing to attend my sister's wedding because of how she treated my husband? AITA for refusing to invite my brother's girlfriend to my wedding because of her behavior at my engagement party? This is going to be long, but I really want to give all the context. I, 32F, have been with my fiancé, David, 34M, for 6 years. We recently got engaged, and we're in the midst of planning our wedding. My younger brother, Jason, 28M, has been dating a woman named Vanessa, 27F, for about a year and a half. Things with Vanessa have always been complicated, to say the least. A few weeks after our engagement, I threw an engagement party. I wanted it to be a relaxed, intimate affair with close family and a few friends. David's side of the family and my parents were there, and Jason came with Vanessa. Up until this point, I'd met Vanessa maybe 3 times, and each time had been a little uncomfortable, but nothing I could put my finger on. I try to keep an open mind because, well, she's my brother's partner. From a moment she walked in, Vanessa was rude and condescending. She immediately made comments about my home, my furniture, and even my cooking. She turned up her nose at the food I spent hours preparing and loudly critiqued everything on the buffet. "Oh, you went with store-bought dessert? Cute," she said in front of everyone, as if trying to humiliate me. I laughed it off awkwardly, hoping it was just a one-time joke. But it wasn't. Throughout the evening, she continuously belittled small things, my choice of wine, the way I decorated, even my dress, and it felt like she was trying to make me uncomfortable on purpose. The worst part came when my fiancé's grandmother, who is 88 and very hard of hearing, tried to start a conversation with Vanessa. Vanessa practically ignored her, rolled her eyes, and then said loudly, "Do you even know what you're talking about?" Everyone in the room went silent. I felt humiliated, and David was furious. He whispered to me that we should have left, but I didn't want to create a bigger scene. Jason didn't intervene much either. He tried to laugh it off once or twice, but Vanessa just turned it on him. "Don't defend her. You're just going to embarrass yourself too," she said. I spent the rest of the evening quietly, trying to enjoy the party despite Vanessa's behavior. Several of our guests later told me they noticed and were uncomfortable too. My parents were sympathetic, but kind of shrugged it off, saying maybe she was just nervous. After the party, I told Jason privately that Vanessa's behavior was unacceptable and that I didn't want her making my wedding stressful. He got defensive, saying I was overreacting and that it was just her sense of humor. I explained that there's a big difference between joking and being cruel to the person who's hosting you. He said that if I excluded her, it would destroy their relationship and that I would be the bad sibling. Fast forward to a month ago, I finalized the wedding guest list. I invited everyone I cared about, and the only person I didn't include was Vanessa. I told Jason I wasn't comfortable having her there. I offered that he could come alone, or we could host a small meet and greet with Vanessa another time, but she wouldn't be at the wedding. He went ballistic. He texted me, "I can't believe you're doing this. Do you hate me? Do you want to ruin my relationship? Are you really going to let her be the villain in this story when all she did was joke a little?" I tried to explain that she humiliated me in front of family, and that my wedding is about celebrating me and David, not about accommodating someone who has made me uncomfortable repeatedly. Jason escalated it further. He started posting vague, dramatic messages on social media about family drama and toxic people ruining celebrations without naming names. Several of my relatives saw it and started asking me to reconsider. David and I stood firm, but the tension is insane. My parents are now divided. My mom thinks I'm right. My dad says I should play nice for family harmony. A couple of people have accused me of being controlling and selfish. They say it's my brother's partner, and I should let him bring whoever he wants. But from my perspective, she has already proven she doesn't respect me or my space. I feel like the wedding is a boundary, not a negotiation. David supports me completely, saying that the day is about us and our happiness, not about avoiding hurt feelings for someone who has consistently crossed the line. Now, Jason refuses to speak to me unless I apologize for excluding Vanessa unfairly, and he says he might not attend the wedding if she isn't invited. I'm crushed because I love my brother and want him there, but I don't feel I can compromise on this. I also feel like if I give in, it sets a precedent that people can treat me poorly and still get rewarded with access to major life events. So, Reddit, am I the asshole for not inviting my brother's girlfriend after her behavior at my engagement party? I feel like I'm standing up for myself and protecting the energy of my wedding, but everyone keeps telling me I'm being too harsh. I realize this is long, but I wanted to give full context. This isn't a matter of being picky about a guest list. It's about repeated behavior that disrespects me and my fiancé. I genuinely don't know if I'm overreacting or if I have a right to set this boundary. Thank you for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss new videos also. Leave a comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Your support and engagement mean a lot to me. See you in the next video.